erasing somebody's lineage, you know, essentially bringing them into your family and ignoring who they are and their lineage, that is what's prohibited in Islam, which is not what most people mean by adoption in our times. But foster care and adoptive care are actually great virtues and great parts of the Sunnah that need more capable families to take on, because a lot of children, particularly in the foster care system in the United States, that were raised with Islamic values, because of the lack of Muslim families participating in foster care, end up actually losing their religion and identity altogether. As they're taken in, some families, to be fair, do respect the ethics and the lineage, but some are very, can be not as respectful of this heritage. And part of that is on our shoulders, and we do not participate sufficiently in this. So the Prophet ﷺ clearly maintained this, where in his household there were common spaces where, it was essentially as a public space because there were not relatives in the same house. But then there were quarters of the household that were private, that would not be entered. So no one would enter, as comes in the Quran and Surah An-Nur, no one would enter into his, what we would call bedrooms in our times. It's from the adab that even the children of the household without permission when they come of age, so that young children learn in the middle of the night or when people are relaxing or early on that they enter with permission also. So clearly these boundaries were maintained because, for example, from this household, Ali ibn Abi Talib and Fatima would marry because they were never brother and sister, but they were raised in the same household. I really appreciate this next question. It's saying that there are people in the class that don't have necessarily to be cautious not to assume the same base knowledge in Islamic studies or stories of the Sahaba. So in answer to the question, inshallah, absolutely, inshallah, try to keep that in mind and also invite you, inshallah. I get in the zone up here. I'm not going to be offended. Actually, be very, very appreciative if you remind me to explain that to me. I know you mentioned this thing, you didn't say who that is. But I will definitely take that advice to heart while inviting you also, inshallah, to feel free to ask and clarify, inshallah, throughout the class. There was also a suggestion here to address dealing with abusive tendencies in the communities and family that the questioner believes are much more common than we would like to believe, and to learn how to address and deal with them as Muslim and how to function in imperfect families. I think this is incredibly important. This is a discussion that merits much more discussion. This is also something that never finishes. So, alhamdulillah, at this center, we've had a couple, this is from the things that we work with our health team on, to have on a recurring basis, because you can never do it once and be finished. So there are some past sermons, khutbah, as well as Friday night programs, some of which are recorded, are online, reminding and raising the awareness of our community on this matter. Regionally, the Triangle Imams Council has been deliberating particularly some cases that are not well handled by the existing infrastructure at the region, and particularly resources, including legal resources and mental health resources, that are not exclusive in terms of economic ability. And one thing something that we're investigating now is participating with Chief Justice Beasley of North Carolina on an effort, a partnership between faith communities and legal services to provide pro bono, also consultation and support for these types of for people that are in need without, again, needing to exclude others. This continues to be a complex issue. I encourage you to engage, if you're passionate on this issue, with the health team or with various resources, and to be open and vocal, inshallah, with how we can do better. In particular, I have been graciously pushing back a little bit just for the point of view of improving. And honestly, due to the weakness of North Carolina clergy protections, houses of worship in general are not well positioned to actually help see through an abuse case. North Carolina has one of the worst clergy protections in the country. This is a subtle point, but a very substantive point. What I mean is that when a person approaches an imam with what would be considered a confessional, for example, in a Catholic tradition, like I'm struggling with this spiritual thing, I'm having this question, I'm having this issue, and we're religiously advising, that is a privileged conversation, meaning it's confidential, and people can't pull it out of the imam, meaning that even if a court is subpoenaed, and I've been subpoenaed to the court before, you can't be forced because it's a privileged confidential conversation. I'm able to say because of the imam, this is an advising conversation, as long as it's not illegal behavior. In some states, it's allowed that in social, cases of family interactions and so on and so forth, that you have that same ability to advise. But in North Carolina, we don't have that. Therefore, we have changed our posture as a community that we want to educate, we want to advocate, we want to leverage the platform. But honestly, we need partner organizations in the community who have other people that can have the confidential consultation that doesn't trigger either automatic reporting or other things. This is a very subtle issue, but part of the reason why, honestly, this stuff takes specialization, it takes hard work, because anybody can say, we need to talk about this more, but few people have the discipline to do the 6 months of research to change the structure of the center. So on this matter in particular, again, acknowledge that it is more prevalent in our communities than we wish to advise, and that always it bears repetition, but I wanted to let you know these details because quite honestly, we're struggling right now, breaking down the walls between organizations in the community, right? I mean, quite frankly, we will not resolve this issue without partnership with organizations in the community that are focused and specialized on this issue. We don't have the legal posture to be able to do it, or any other masjid in the area. And also, inshallah, to be very sensitive to the fact that when we speak from the minbar, people come. And if we've done this service to people once by not talking about the issue, I don't intend to do this service a second time by not having a question, by not having an answer when they come forward with a question. So when we talk about mental health at IAR, for example, and you go to raleighmasjid.org/health and schedule a consultation, if you do not have insurance, our volunteers know how to deal with that, not say tough love. If you do that, and there's, alhamdulillah, we have a diversity of a community, so some people are able to take referrals to particular sources that do charge an hourly rate, not to the masjid, to some private practice, and then yes, it's absolutely part of their expected investment. Not everybody who walks through the doors here has that capability. If you do not, and it's a legitimate need, we have a dignified, honored process that is confidential under lock and key to work with other government partners or nonprofit partners to be able to make referrals that are income qualified. Without me knowing the name, or anybody else knowing the name. It took well over a year and 4 years of volunteer effort to build that out. And this is not perfect, this is a decision, but I will tell you my decision. I looked straight in the eyes of the mental health professionals and I said, I can have a khutbah. I refuse to do that until I have something to tell people, because I'm not letting them down a second time. So I'm really proud of our health team. We've got a binder this thick downstairs with all these details, income qualified, no insurance, and so on, and the training and the legal documentation to be able to provide this as a free service. Actually, alhamdulillah, from Allah's blessing, we're actually working in partnerships now with some national organizations that can study the model and replicate it to other communities. We're really a proud accomplishment of this community. So I want to be very clear on that. I know there's a lot of detail, but on this issue in particular, on the issue of abuse in our community, I would offer the constructive criticism that too many people come and say, why won't you talk about it and do it? And we do. Every 6 to 12 months, it's on our book list to talk about it, but then we do come up short of our potential to truly serve and empower victims. And that will remain tied to the capacity of our community to complete the circle. I can't go much further in these walls, and I'm raising my hand and admitting it. These are the boundaries of North Carolina law. Other organizations will be able to go further because of the different posture of different specialists. And we're not arrogant, and we don't want our label on it. I just want to help people. And so, inshallah, several people in this room and outside this room, I know are engaged in trying to move from a place of that criticism to actually, okay, how can we move together on the same thing? I hope this is clear, like, this is a room of leaders. I'm not saying that to explain away the question or to defend it, this is very necessary. I guess I'm trying to also illustrate to a room of leaders a lot of what goes behind the scenes to actually see the light of day from. And it's my hope actually that from this room and from this community, that in a couple of years we'll be talking about a more complete solution, or a couple of years, the next short period, we'll be talking about a more complete solution. Next question comes from, alhamdulillah, a first-time attendee of the class. Allah reward you. How does mental health and or interpersonal struggle play into the notion of sacrifice during moments of trials and tribulation? The Prophet ﷺ talks about in a long hadith that I'm summarizing, that a person is not afflicted with anxiety or hardship or depression, and at the end of the hadith he says even the prick of a thorn, except that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would expiate and remove from their sins. And so it is a purification process. The struggles of life, even those struggles that are considered, they just happen, the prick of a thorn or a rose bush. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from His mercy, He is just beyond justice. So even in these human sacrifices, down to the level of even the things that are, for example, the bearing of a child or the raising of a child, the things that also we get benefit from, still the struggle and the travail is rewarded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Specific hadith about this. The gap comes in our heads. Meaning what? If somebody has a cold or the flu, people empathize with them. Not only do they acknowledge the suffering and come to a place of empathy and compassion, they also recognize that from a religious standpoint, this patience and bearing this trial is religiously rewarded and is deserving of spiritual fruit. When people might struggle, with having healthy relationships or with a mental health, condition, whether it's acute in the moment or whether it's chronic, it's something that is due to their makeup and their physical body and their blood chemistry. We do not afford them that same empowering position. This is totally unsubstantiated religiously. This is purely cultural. It is in fact contrary to the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. There is a khutbah about this on the IER website, where we specifically talk about particular evidences. There is one that is focusing on special needs in our community. There is another one talking about the importance of mental health in our community. In both of these khutbah, we give specific evidences of people to the Prophet ﷺ, not with a cold or the flu, but these types of ailments and struggles. One woman that used to suffer, and this also has a physical consequence, but it is part of her makeup, the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created her, that she would suffer from seizures. And when she came to the Prophet ﷺ, it's a very fascinating hadith. She asks the Prophet ﷺ to make dua for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to cure her. And the Prophet ﷺ, who has accepted dua, he gives her a choice. And this is a special case, right? This is not a case of coming to a doctor or any person. This is a religious model. He gives her the choice that if she wishes, he would make dua and she would be cured, or if she wishes, she would be patient and have al-Jannah. Now keep in mind, the example here is because this woman is going to become an example for all believers, right? Doesn't mean that you walk into a doctor's office, or if there's a medicine or so on, yes, you seek treatment. The Prophet ﷺ said that Allah has sent down the disease and cure and made for every disease a cure, so seek treatment. But this woman is going to become a model for what? She selected that she would be patient, and she had the guarantee. She's one of the Sahaba I demonstrated that was given Jannah while alive on earth. She is a special case. But it became an example that what? Patience, constancy, steadfastness during trial is from the keys to Jannah. She asked the Prophet ﷺ that just that when she And just to make dua that when she's afflicted with this, that she would not be exposed. And so he made dua for that. So she became a seminal case, a role model in this case, right? Other Sahaba had particular struggles or conditions. Again, I go into a lot of details in the khutbah. Also, Iqamah Sulaiman has lectures on this, Dr. Atif Hussain, the American Muslim Health Professionals Organization, lots of people. There's a lot of this on, some of the resources if you're interested in further learning. But certainly, this notion of sacrifice and giving is part of what is rewarded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why a person who are patients with a single disease that they are given that other people don't struggle with, that might then take them to higher heights than the worship of another person their entire life. I remember a parent when I was living in Boston, they were gifted with a son, a very, very special young man. But everything with this young man and his creation was a challenge. In other words, I'll give you the words of that father. His words always stuck with me. He said, everything that other parents take for granted, we see the miracle that it is in celebrating. Because what would happen was their son at times would kind of be able to breathe with some assistance, and at times would really struggle to go around. His eating, when they would, I just remember like the tears and smile on their face when he would swallow a morsel of food on his own, right? Each of these things is a miracle. And his family was tested more, subhanAllah, after a few years, and he just had this radiant smile, this young man. But this young man died as a child, and I attended his funeral. It was very heavy, very difficult. But this family was so dignified at every step of the way. Every step of the way. They had dreams like everybody had dreams. They had very successful careers. They had a very active social life. When they had that child, they continued, but things changed. They were never the same again. They couldn't go to every career function. They couldn't go to every networking event. They had to make a lot of sacrifices. They didn't consider it. They were happy. That attitude is the attitude that Allah has selected a household for a particular test. Allah in His wisdom has selected a household for a particular test. Sometimes in the patience of a single test, the person would have the reward that would be more than the reward of a lifetime of worship for Allah. Next question. When all of dunya is in front of you, how do you realistically distance yourself from worldly desires and bring yourself closer to Allah? And then what steps do you take? Part of the beauty of Islam is that it addresses a diversity of people, of time, and of circumstance. It is a soothing touch when one is afflicted with poverty or hardship or difficulty. Yet it is also a realistic grounding when one person is given authority or power or money or wealth. For that reason, you will find that obviously the Prophet ﷺ relates to all people. We talked about the diversity of his test. Remember last week. But for example, you'll find like in our times, one of the spiritual, specialists and scholars of our tradition, Al-Hasan al-Basri, he is quoted so often in our times. You want to know a subtle reason why? Al-Hasan al-Basri was talking to people at a time when they were flush with wealth. Subtle. Hasan al-Basri is a master and a great scholar of our tradition. But why is it so? You hear a statement and, oh, wow. Because the people we were talking to are very similarly culturally to Americans in this respect. That they were generally given so much. They had a period of relative material comfort. Also, you see more people in our tradition reclaiming the tradition of what? Al-Andalus, right? Spain. Why many periods in Spain were also given relative plenty. So our religion spans the spectrum. It is empowering for different people to be, and we as human beings may go through different circumstances. But part of the beauty of our religion is does not ask us to quash or ignore our human desires. It asks us to regulate and discipline them. And we capture this simply in the statement that a person holds dunya in their hand, not in their heart. Part of this is achieved through study, through learning, through stories of great people of the past. I've mentioned to you the book Rising Soul, a nice translation of a spiritual manual. Obviously, several of the works of Imam al-Ghazali have been translated in modern times in accessible, good English translation that talk about spiritual direction, among many, many, many others, but I also believe a fundamental part of this is learned by doing and struggling, not by reading. So a big part of learning this is keeping the company of people that model this behavior and struggling oneself to give, to, not be overjoyed, but also not be falsely humble, and to implement the teachings that we've been talking about, inshallah. So these are some thoughts. This is a broader question, inshallah. Maybe we'll also leave this for some specific sources. Question is there, this is a question I'm going to read back to you. Is there a mentioning of the mother of Ibrahim alayhi salam? A very, very profound question. Is there a mentioning of the mother of Ibrahim alayhi salam? This comes all the way back to the beginning of the class. You have an indirect proof to answer this question. So go beyond yes and no and say why. Why do you think? It's not mentioned in the Quran al-Karim.
Is there like connection between the word Arabic for mother, and nation like ummah?
Some ulama have talked about this connection, but I have not seen in the tafsir in the Ibrahim kana ummah that this would be interpreted that this would be connected to the mother. However, linguistically, the point that you made is very, very important and valid, that the mother has this, among other narrations, there's this special status, and literally, a woman could raise a generation with leaders. And so, we could come at this from the angle of narration. We don't have a Quranic narration, and so perhaps Israeliyat and so on. But perhaps a more direct proof is what? In the very beginning, when we talked about the family of Ibrahim, we talked about the difference between the scholars, whether the man that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls Abi is who? His father or his uncle? Been alive with this debate be in existence? It would not be in existence. So we don't have a direct, strong proof that the mother of Ibrahim was not present. However, it seems to be the likelihood that she had died or was not present when he was extremely young, right? And from this comes the debate of him being raised in a relative's household. His mother was alive, but without being even raised by his uncle, certainly with who his uncle was. However, this raises a broader point. Our tradition celebrates and elevates the voices of women, and we culturally lose the beauty of part of our tradition in doing that. So looking at the Quran al-Karim, four of the most influential figures that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about in the person of Musa alayhi salam as a young man, brought his mother. His mother, his sister, Asiyah, the wife of Fir'aun. There's no man mentioned in the formative and even as it continues, he has a relationship with his father-in-law, but and more talks about in Surah Al-Qasas, it talks about there is so much distinction about the power and influence of these three great women. In the early life of the Prophet ﷺ, no, not just the early life, the later life too. There are many influential women and are discussed at length. In particular, in his younger years, most of the people that are mentioned in these formative, crucial years are women. Halima Sa'diyya, the mother of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Amina, Sulaym. He has beautiful, beautiful stories with those that survived among them many, many years later. Halima Sa'diyya has heart-wrenching stories, just tear-jerking stories with him when she reunites with him in his 50s after decades of separation. And you can imagine the pride of this great woman who raised him as a young man. Sulaym has some of the most beautiful narrations with the Prophet ﷺ. She knew him as a younger man, and we could keep going. Similarly, in our tradition, there are a number of great figures where women are not only celebrated in the capacity of influence on men and women, but that is part of it. The mother of al-Bukhari is mentioned. The father is either passed away or not not as recorded historically. The mother has an outsized influence on the person of al-Bukhari. The mother of al-Shafi'i. And we could keep going and going and going. But it should be mentioned also that some great women of our tradition, Fadila bint Sa'd al-Khayr, in modern times, the Shaykh Sa'd, the Shaykh Nafisa, many, many others, some of these women did not marry. Some of them married and did not have children. Some of them had distinguished career opportunities. So there is this beauty and diversity, alhamdulillah, that I think it's very fair to criticize that we're both illiterate in and do not raise and elevate, right? Also, Quran talks about the Queen of Sheba. And here I'm going to be critical. I was speaking to one of our sisters, alhamdulillah, who leads, a courageous line of work in advocating and supporting the marginalized and victims. And I shared with you, I've been doing research and exploring the beauty of this tradition. And I asked her, who is the most influential Muslim woman of our tradition in your life? So before I finished the sentence, she immediately came back, Khadija, radiallahu anha. And she looked at her like, why couldn't I figure out in the first place? And in that, like, how prominent it was in her life, to be honest, I was taken aback. Like, if you ask me who, obviously the Prophet messaged, but like, who is your, I would like trip and do this, and I love and this and that. But for her, it was like right there, front and center in her life. She said something that really took me by surprise. She talked about how because she was her role model, that she took the name of Khadija, and started talking about her accomplishments. Today you learned that Khadija was a divorcee. She lost a husband to marriage. She had multiple children, and the men of Mecca were clamoring to marry her. She received many proposals before the Prophet ﷺ, and she rejected. She was a person of great nobility, great chastity. She was financially incredibly accomplished. Not only in wealth, but in the way she acquired it. Everybody's business is like cheated people, lied. She was looking for employees that would earn an honest dollar. It's one of the reasons why the Prophet ﷺ, who was working for her, his character caught her eye as she learned how he discharged business as they were traveling. But that also means what? She wasn't sitting at home collecting a passive paycheck. As a woman in Arabia, she was monitoring this. So although the Prophet ﷺ had a great reputation, she had people narrating to her how he was conducting her business. So she's a very shrewd and intelligent manager and businesswoman. The narrations obviously are pretty much unanimous that she was older than the Prophet ﷺ. Many narrations of Sirah say that she was 15 years his senior. To be fair, there is some distinction about in general. It's like that she was older than her, whether by a few years or more years. And then she told me something I wasn't expecting. She said, and these are her words, not mine. She said, but even getting ahead in a man's world, she never lost what it meant to be feminine and to be a woman. And she said, this is her words, not mine. She said, this is one of my central criticisms of feminism today. So you see, we take part of this story and we leave the rest. Khadija bint Khuwaylid, yes, she was the work supervisor of the Prophet ﷺ. Yes, she initiated the proposal. Yes, she was wealthy. But people that were her equal in age, companions, would call her to the end of her days like Ummuna Khadija. We call her our mother Khadija, right? Why? Because it's not minimizing Safarzim or limiting her role as a mother. It's recognizing this person has an incredible ability to shape lives that I have not outgrown. Her contemporaries looked up to her the way you would look up to a mother. Meaning what? We talk about tarbiyah like tarbiyah and raising young children. No. We need tarbiyah, and that's a master of tarbiyah. I want to be in the company of that person because that person helps me become better. It wasn't kids talking about her that way. It was her equals talking about her that way. And that is a responsibility that Allah has given men and women. But it is a gift and an influence that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given women much more. Much more. And so she retained that, limiting her context or her gifts in other areas. And she became, as we know, one of the greatest women ever to live on planet Earth. And so I want to share with you these words because it's actually linked to another question here, which was talking about, drawing the line between trying to fit in an Islamic woman in the workplace, in the school, and following Islam properly. And how do we implement modesty in such teachings? I might suggest that those role models are a part of it. That a person can be uniquely proud of their identity, who they are, their ethnicity, their nationality, their gender, themselves, and yet accommodating the equal of others. And that's where perhaps culturally we read certain things into the personality of women that is unfair. Some men are more kind of introverted. Some people are very outgoing. And you don't see the same pressure that is placed on a person as you do on a woman, right? But connecting to the mothers of the believers, you see some were very outgoing, some were quiet and shy. Being quiet and shy doesn't mean she was a weak woman. Being quiet and shy doesn't mean she was a weak woman no more than it means for a man. But some of the mothers of believers were very opinionated. Some would speak first, some would speak last. Some were more active in this public space, some were less active. And so our deen affords a flexibility and a spectrum for this, for men and women, while maintaining certain boundaries of modesty and ethics. And let me be more specific. And the introduction to the book Al-Muhaddithat by Sheikh Muhammad Akram al-Nadawi is truly remarkable in this regard. He says explicitly in the introduction that he is not writing this. He's writing it as a historian, not from the point of view of feminism or sociology, but honestly he pens what I have never seen equal in English or in Arabic on this topic. He talks about how Western norms and philosophies are in line with Islamic in many things, in the rule of law and so on and so forth. But in this, there is a stark difference for men and women. That in the Western workplace, if you have a physical beauty, if you have a physical presence, you project that onto others. Pardon me for the examples, music videos, popular entertainment, so on and so forth. And it's changing, right? If somebody wore fashionable garments today or went to America 50 years ago dressed in the way that people dress on the beach, they would like, what alien just descended from outer space? It would be culturally rejected and it's having nothing to do with Islam. Our Islamic norms are different in this regard, not enforcing it on others, but both men and women, their physical presence, pardon me for the example, if you've got it, flaunt it. No, it's reversed. That is, it is reserved, it is privatized for one's family. So as a person comes out to the public square, it is a meritocracy. You are judged for your merit and your contributions, not who you're the son or daughter of, or what color your skin is, or how good you look. That is something that is privatized for a closer circle and shared with a people that are committed to love you inside and out, essentially. This is very counter to Western values. But what people don't get is whether the gap is bigger for men or women kind of depends on your time and place. Muslim women at the time of the Prophet ﷺ fit in with non-Muslim women a lot more than Muslim men did. This is hard to relate to. It's the opposite today. Christian and Jewish women, really up until about 200 years ago, were very, very similar. You don't have to trust me. Professor Carl Ernst, from a historian's perspective, having no religious motivation, others have talked about this. So this is just history, this is just fact. So carrying that modesty in a way that retains beauty and retains dignity, but also is consistent with those values, is one of the places where there's a bit of a distinction. Inshallah, again, this is a broad question, I'm giving a broad answer, but this is something that we can talk about now, inshallah. Okay, so I've got a few more questions for next time, but I'm going to switch gears, inshallah, to open our Masahib to Surah As-Saffat. That's Surah number 37. We're starting with verse number 83.
Surah
Surah As-Saffat. Surah number 37. Verse number 83. I just warned you all about technology. You didn't believe me when I told you, but now you've got an overwhelming amount of evidence. I'm going to try. So whenever you see this stuff, just a disclaimer for the rest of eternity. This is not my background. Whatever you see here. Yeah, you see I put it right on time. I knew something bad was going to happen. Okay, that's my background.
من شيعته
had like four, he loved all the prophets and the messengers, but he had four people like in Jannah. This is the first four I want to meet them, right? And that, there's a certain beauty and innocence to it that it's that real in their lives, right? That they love these people, look up to them, that they're role models to this level. And we're privileged, alhamdulillah, to get just a piece of that, alhamdulillah. I want to dive in for about 10 minutes in small groups. We'll look at one of the most famous stories, obviously, of this great family, the story of the sacrifice of the son. So that starts with verse number 99. Verse number 99, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the gift of the son, all the way to 113 is the part of this passage that we're focusing on, inshallah, for the purpose of discussion. It's a lot to unpack here. It's a beautiful story. It's a seminal story. And yet also, Allah Ta'ala gave this eternal dignity and distinction that, Eid al-Adha is tied with this story. The festival of the sacrifice is what Eid al-Adha means. It's this sacrifice, none other. This is what more than 1.5 billion people worldwide commemorate, this choice, this moment. They commemorate it in a very specific way that maybe we've become culturally comfortable with, but we want to come back and see why. Why this? This family had incredible moments throughout their lives, and yet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala distinguished this one. Why? And why in this manner, and why this family? I'm going to suggest a format for you to do this reflection on. I suggest, inshallah, in groups, maybe 7 to 10 people, that you aim to make a list, like make a bulleted list of lessons or reflections. You noticed this, you did that, and to really start to unpack this and look at it from different angles, inshallah. Then we'll look at it together, and then we'll go to another place in the Quran and even look at it from a lens that I imagine perhaps you may not have looked at it from that lens before. Sound good? So we're going to take, inshallah, 10 minutes. I recommend groups of about 7 to 10, inshallah.
Did we get announcements? Yes. Get everything in the class. Huh? Get everything in the class. After what he's done. Get a haircut. Yes. Well, yes, but I also spiked it, which makes it more different. After what he's done speaking, just get up and make your announcements. Okay. Should I tell him or first? No, because you'll do like after class. Oh, after class? Gotcha. So,
I think it start from the beginning where like, you know, people want to like, you know, Google like, you know, people, like the things that you are like guarding you, they're not helping you. They're not taking stuff. When you come to the car, it's like start to like, you know, go away from these people. That's why when we like job, like all those random people that they're good. God hard. And that's when like God have like like I think this is like where the next one like having God hard, market people, all that thing. So that's kind of like go kind of like go off in a bigger scope. Because you have a sound heart. And when like you see that, you recognize that. So like you would actually prevent that freedom like the lesson. Have a sound heart, desire to be among people who are good. But on the basis. I mean, when like someone like tries to suppress their anger, so they don't express it, they start to suppress it. Kind of like things so far, like the lessons that we take from those
Inshallah, we'll come back together in 2 minutes, inshallah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I saw some great things happening, so we took an extension. Alhamdulillah, I don't want to interrupt your conversations. But inshallah, we want to continue by looking at this, inshallah, in depth, and we'll ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to open more and more for us, inshallah. I'm going to take you back to what we were talking about a week or two before. Some of us have been hearing about this story for 30, 40, 50 years. The more you distance yourself from the story, it's going to turn out fine. The less you will get out of it. You're capping your ability to relate to it. The more you put yourself in his shoes, like Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, inshallah, you will get more and more out of it, inshallah. Really, when you center yourself on the story, it will bring you to tears. It is really a remarkable story among remarkable stories. Coming back to Al-Quran al-Kareem, what was this on the speaker? This is good. This is a good test of code.
See. You can see him on the TV.
SubhanAllah, it's very heavy to see the haram without people in it. It's really like, understand, did they open it again? For Salah or for? But it reminded me of a reflection, SubhanAllah, that SubhanAllah yashtabu sam'un an sam'un. That SubhanAllah, imagine all these people are speaking at once to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with their innermost fears, with their deepest desires. And hearing one does not cause Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to not hear the next. And we have two people in the room and people start talking. No, stop. Wait. Can you guys go one at a time? SubhanAllah. Coming to the story, what is one lesson that you extracted from this story? And I encourage you, inshallah, to take notes, because I'm sure I'm actually taking notes, because I'm sure you'll have reflections that, inshallah, will all benefit. What's one lesson that you want?
We had a discussion about respect between father and son. But this whole idea that Prophet Ibrahim didn't argue go ahead and follow the order of Allah. He had a discussion with his son specifically. And that whole interaction in itself showed the respect between father and son. We kind of, as a parents, we kind of forget that. And we need to remind ourselves on that they're individuals too. We have to respect their opinion.
There's a beautiful, beautiful point. Draw your attention to area number 102. It's a technical point of Arabic language, and so I want to raise it so that we all see it, inshallah. Allah Ta'ala says about the address of Prophet Ibrahim to his son, قَالَ يَا بُنَيَّ, oh my son. What's the normal way to say my son in Arabic language? Ibn, right? And so the way you would say ya is like addressing. So the normal address is yabni, ya ibni, ya ibni, which would be yabni. That's the normal one. It just means my son. That's not what's said in the Quran. What's said in the Quran is what? Ya bunay. This is in Arabic. It's called. Since we all speak English, we have no grammar knowledge, at least I know. But in English, it's called the diminutive form. In Arabic, it's called tasghir. Like, for example, if you know someone named Suhaib, this is like the tasghir of Sahl. There is a lot. Omar, tasghir becomes Umayr, right? This form, in this usage here, indicates like a special hanan and warmth and so on. Right? It's technical, so I don't want you to miss it. And then, on the way, when his son addresses his father, he says, قَالَ يَا أَبَتِي. We talked about this way back when it was Surah Maryam, remember? Normally it would be Ya Abi. So, and even in these, subhanAllah, Allah's selection of these terms is an ocean of knowledge that they had a very special relationship. Again, this can get lost in translation. He declared, oh, my son, shall you do this? And then they said, no, like in our language, there's a difference between saying, oh, my father, with saying that. Talking about a special relationship of trust, of compassion, of mercy. And if you can't have compassion and mercy hanging out on the dinner table, or playing a game, or advising in schoolwork, then don't expect someone to follow you when you say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that we have to do. So in this is a specific indication that they had a very, very special relationship. In addition, as this group mentioned, in seeking his opinion is a great element of tarbiyah in creating interest in the mind of the listener, not in the mind of the one who is addressing. Prophet Ibrahim intends to comply with the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but he doesn't want to do it solo. He is, rather than commanding his son, he is using a word that would create a ta'ah with him. This is essentially not only connecting oneself with Allah, but seeking to facilitate connection for others. It's a big issue in teaching and holistic education, right? Understanding that people have different keys to their hearts, different approaches, and hikmah, wisdom, can be considered saying the right thing at the right time, right? So, alhamdulillah, when somebody sees something wrong, it's like, and I need to tell them, okay, that's a start. That's a start that the heart is awake that something's not wrong. But it's a lack of hikmah. Why? Because knowing that something's wrong and I've got this thing in my chest, I'm going to go project it on somebody else. Brother, this is haram with 5 A's. That's not bad. In and of itself, it indicates the heart's awake. You could be fast asleep. Some people don't care whether it's halal or haram. That's worse. But it is a lack of hikmah, a lack of wisdom to incorporate this other person, inshallah. So beautiful lessons. What other lessons did we extract?
In addition to that, we also talked about the mother, that even though the father was not around, the mother also instilled a sense of respect in her son, that he eventually showed the vision even when given a choice. So the net lesson we learned is that the true form of submission at the family unit is worth celebrating, which is why,
It's a very deep reflection, and really I hope the one thing that we take from this space is a deeper appreciation of the Sayyidah Hajar. This case is the greatest case of Prophet Ismail having this sense of family respect and of submission as a family, which again is a credit to his mother before anyone else. I don't mean it just in the general sense. In the specific test of this family, the father was not physically able to be present because of the unique circumstance. And Ismail is a young person. More than anything, he is modeling what he saw in his mother. I want to tell you something that's very subtle about all our reflections. MashaAllah, today we asked the mention of the mother of Ibrahim alayhi salam. We've been talking about raising these voices in general and getting these things. I don't want you to feel like what we're doing in this space, like nobody did it before, or these are all special reflections. But here's the thing, and you can get deeper understanding of our tradition when you do this. You know, the reality is, if you pick up a book of tafsir, of Surah Al-Saffat, you're not going to hear this breakdown one by one in classical sources as much as modern ones. You know why? The reason is very, very subtle. In classical works, they used to take for granted two things that are very absent in our context, including myself. First of all, the lessons in language were considered to be understood by default. So they were not mentioned in most of the classical works. This applies today not only to the breadth of the Muslim world that does not speak Arabic, but it's to Arabic speakers as well, who are significantly weaker than people at the time of the Prophet ﷺ and afterwards. And then may Allah help us what's going to happen 3 generations later, with like text and emojis and stuff, are also they're weakening the language of people. Why? Because I'm like cutting things and so on and touching, and so I gotta put like smiley faces and rockets and stuff because my language does not communicate my emotion, right? It's real, right? Or is it just me that gets this stuff? I just check. I'm emoji illiterate if you haven't noticed, but it's okay. So, for example, the tafsir of Sheikh al-Sha'rawi in the 20th century, which he refused to call a tafsir in his life but became known among people, he considered it his reflections. Really, one of the key elements of tawfiq that he was given was the ability to bring out these lessons of Arabic language, not that nobody had it before him, that most people considered it for granted before him. And he saw the erosion of language. So no way you're going to open up Ibn Kathir and say, Ya Bunay, and Ya Ibni, and Ya Abati. Why? Because everybody understood it. They were the masters of language. Man, at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, you want to like put somebody down. You go to like the county, the square, and you start dropping poetry. You know what I mean? Or you want to like raise people up or put them down. Let me tell you, there's nothing like old Arabic poetry in raising people or debasing people. Like seriously, people say lines, like there's this line, subhanAllah, for An-Nabi, that if love from you is true, then everything is light, and all that is above the earth is dust. What this means is if I have your love, then every hardship is easy, and the love of every person and human being is dust like the dust that they're standing on. One of the scholars said that this line should not be said except for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this is true. But ironically, this was said in like Nifaq Sayf al-Dawla, like in kissing up to a ruler of the time. So you see, this is hundreds of years after Prophet ﷺ, and they're dropping poetry. You see what I'm saying? So the language was one piece that was missing. But there's another piece that's very subtle. Just so you don't think in the back of their mind that they were not understanding the prowess of the Sayyidah Hajar, the greatness of Khadija, because it's not there. They're not mentioning it for men or women. Why? because it was expected that the lessons derived, except for the technical ones, are understood by context. So later in life, in a lesser test, Prophet Ibrahim comes to the Prophet Ismail as an older man, as a married man. And he says, غَيِّرْ عَتَبَتْ بَيْتِكَ. That change, it's hard to translate, like the greeting, or almost like it's the doorstep, the entrance to your home. This is a subtle reference of marriage advice. Due to the breakdown of some of the, essences of makarim al-akhlaq and so on, he felt that this marriage had gotten to the point where it was going to impact the application of religious principles. So it was better for both parties to separate. This is a very specific case, right? It's not light, it's not 5 seconds, but those 3 words, what do you get from it? Importance of selecting a spouse from what, and the impact. The connection that marriage is like half of the deen. The respect of the parents and the voice of this, and so on and so forth. What don't you get? Oh, you show up and like marriage advice is like 3 words without anybody having talked about it. No, it's understood that there were efforts, there were impacts, and so on. It wasn't like, I get rid of this. No, it was that after effort, it was clear. If it's getting to this point, this marriage is no longer in the interest of these 2 people, and the harm of separation is better than it. All of that was understood. I'm not making that up. You find it in the old works and so on. They didn't have to outline it. It's not fair to expect that from a modern reflection, which is why we take more effort, inshallah, in peeling this back. It's more in line with our learning strategy. These 2 subtle points make sense? It's very, very important. So we mentioned, yes, question.
Who's giving the advice? Is it Prophet Ismail? Or somebody giving the
Prophet Ibrahim on a visit to Ismail, to a married Prophet Ismail, sees a breakdown of elements of respect and so on, and certain elements where he assesses that the divorce in this case is a lesser harm than the path that's going down. The words of the Prophet Ibrahim are 3 words. Change the entrance to your home. Not only did they understand that means I'm advising you that it's time for this marriage to end, but all of what I mentioned and more is understood. It's implied. And so it comes more in books of fiqh and tarbiyah and so on. It doesn't come in like the breakdown of this path. You see what I'm saying? And people understood not to misapply it, right? So somebody came to a Muslim judge and they're like, well, somebody walked in and they said, marriage doesn't look so good and so on. Muslim judge is going to say, get that person over here and put him down. You see what I'm saying? Nobody would allow that application. But anyway, these are 2 subtle points. I don't want you to feel like we have come to what people before us have not come to. They approached it in a different way and articulated it in a different way. Other reflections.
Start with one of the questions. Why isn't Ismail mentioned by name at all in this passage, even though the verse 102 is Ibrahim addressing Ismail, but then later on Ishaq is mentioned twice, so Ishaq, and then later on وباركنا عليه وعلى إسحاق.
It's a very deep question, inshallah. Both Prophet Ismail and Ishaq are mentioned by name in the Quran al-Karim. Neither is mentioned in a direct named reference to who al-Dhabih is, who the sacrifice, the son to be sacrificed is. Therefore, for example, one of the indirect proofs is because there's a Ghulam Halim, a forbearing son, and later Ishaq is mentioned in this passage. This is a proof of some ulama that say Ismail, and this is the dominant idea, that Ismail was the one to be sacrificed and Ishaq came later. But it's a level below a direct named reference. Therefore, it is part of Islamic scholarly debate, and I'm calling it out because I don't intend to go into it in this class, It's a technical point. If you want, I can give you references, we can read about it. But it is a technical point of debate. Is al-Dhabih Ismail or Ishaq? Is the son that the Prophet Ibrahim was commanded to slaughter Ismail or Ishaq? Actually, there was like this incident where, alhamdulillah, we have the open house today, relations with people and dawah and communication is very important. But some people come with the wrong agenda, right? So there was this fake setting where it was like a dialogue and discussion, and these people came armed with questions to closet proselytize and so on and so forth, having studied. So we're going around in this not here but somewhere else, in this event that's supposed to be focusing on understanding, trying to insert doubt. So one of the things people are asking were oh, do you think it's Ishmael or Isaac that was slaughtered? This is a legitimate question. It's actually an issue of debate in our tradition. But from a tarbiyah perspective, what's the answer? Why is it your business or my business? There's all this lessons, right? All these lessons of sacrifice and so on that you're worried about Ismail or Ishaq. If you're curious, read up on it. It's cool. But it's all of this chastity and so on and so forth. For Yusuf and what's her name? Did they get married? Where's your brain, bro? You see what I'm saying? So asking these questions is very, very important. So ask definitely, because we love this question, subtle point. Scholars of any discipline say from the maturity of a level of discipline like science or knowledge, is that they entertain questions that they're not expected to ever encounter. And you believe there are fiqh opinions that are the better part of 1,000 years old on if a Muslim was on the moon, which direction would they fly? Would they go in Qibla? Can you believe that? Now, 1,000 years old. I want you to imagine if you're among the Prophet and be look, there's these metal buckets full of people with HEPA air filters that fly 30,000 feet, right, in the air. And then they land and nobody dies. What'd they do to you? Something bad. So at the time they did this, this is not in the realm of possible. But they're chilling in such intellectual growth and strength. Everybody's clamoring to get into, they're clamoring to get into Harvard here. Oh, man, I'm a rival with Harvard. They're clamoring to get into MIT, right? That's a good deal, right? So they're talking about these crazy questions. Why? Because they've already done wudu and this and that. So similarly, from their love of these things and from the maturity of the tradition, they talked about this, that Abi Ishaq or Ismail, but they didn't then go fixate on this stuff. So this is a partial answer to what you were mentioning, a very deep question, that there is no direct proof. And so both opinions are valid from an Islamic perspective. Each has their evidence. The evidence that it's Prophet Ismail, there's a lot of strength to it. The evidence that there was not another son at the time this command was happening is also quite powerful. But in all that debate, there isn't this shadow, let me ignore half the lineage of Abraham. All these Arabs and all this stuff are the sons of an illegitimate relationship, so I can ignore the Prophet of that. There isn't that theological motivation. We celebrate both. And underneath, again, not all people, not all perspectives on biblical tradition, but absolutely to be criticized is this shadow attitude of supremacy behind some of the ways that particularly Hajar or Hagar and her lineage are treated. And therefore, in this debasement comes also why you think you're special and your guy was the one that was sacrificed. This has to be called out. This is not all biblical perspectives, it's not all Christians and Jews, but it is alive and real. And you have to understand just like certain strains of Muslim sects, SECTS, have roots that are criticized historically, you have to understand in the American religious history, there are entire, denominations that split off of white supremacy, off of questions about slavery, off of things that were on the backs of people. Is this part of some people that have claimed Islam? You better believe it, and we criticize it to death. So also, we would suggest that this is worthy of scholarly criticism also, and where it shows up in any tradition, or even in non-religious ideology. Next point, John.
What we were discussing is to highlight the spiritual aspect of this passage versus the technical aspect of it. So it starts with جعل فوقهم قلبي سليم, and then it ends with فلما أسلم. So you approach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with a purified heart, and then the final is you granted the definition of Islam and what it means to submit. But in the middle of it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings this spiritual highlight to real life issues that we have to deal with in real life scenarios, where how to deal with a parent, how to deal with a son, how to deal with your own people, how to address your son with Ya Bunay and Fama Dhannuka or Fama Dhannukum Rabbil Alamin and Mada Dhannuk. So all of that is like sort of admitting the fact that like you're not around the whole time, so you want to approach with conversation with your son and all of that. All of that is going to help you achieve what it means to Falamma Aslama, which a lot of times we fail to sort of put together in our tradition, where we're even focusing on Falamma Aslama wa ja'a rabbuka biqalbin salim, and purified heart, and not necessarily able to communicate that with like real life scenarios that would actually lead you to that versus leaving it on a bookshelf and having it.
Reflections of the spiritual tradition, particularly the part about Islam and Alhamdulillah was mentioned. We have three that I see, so we'll start here.
What we spoke about, you said, in all the history, but we have been assigned things. Even if they were, writing things, I would have even put for the journal, or what they are doing as assigned things. And then moving on to the other value of, if you kind of say, not some of the assigned things, so this value of someone for the issue of someone choosing to play the time, they can be followed the father. And then when the father is about to do what, and then accepted and submitted to the call of Allah, then the pastor essentially say that in the sense that, I'm not going to do that, like they both of them accepted what they were supposed to do, and then he initiated that to the congregation, but that's intentional, and like you, what the intention was so that's they accepted and received it. That's the idea that we discussed in our group.
Let's having beautiful, beautiful reflections of the connection of just the righteous lineage and many things. We have several comments, inshallah. Stay on time. So I'll ask everybody, just as the last couple people did, to try to summarize your lesson in 1 minute so we can get as many people, inshallah, as possible. Yes. Okay.
You said one thing about how he really finds parts it, and it's part of the thing where it's almost like a hopeful rock too, because believing into the death of the act for progeny, but also asking for long life in order to have that progeny, so it's kind of indirect. So of saving Allah, but also hopeful rock that I will save you, not like saving you. I will serve you, but hopefully have righteous stuff. And just the impact of how it's not that blessing is that so how only that being despair and also focusing on that faith focus on the children, even
First thing we were talking about was that the first thing he did was make the law first, and he was, before he even started immigrated to the land, he made the law first. He thought he had a great process, he had a great trust in the law first, and that a lot of folks that he had to walk up resilience first, before he even started, and then, I think that was it, it said he brings Dustin along, has to watch us, and they said you can ask us, child, you can say, he's has to watch his child,
Yes.
whatever.
Beautiful.
The last آية وباركنا عليه وعلى إسحاق ومن ذريتنا محسن وظالم لنفسه مبين. My two things. First thing is lineage, which is not a precondition for being righteous or not righteous, and it's mentioned over here. Then the second thing is that it's Ishmael and Ishaq. Ishmael and Ishaq both loved together in that union, which is, I think, why we are studying the story of Abraham, because it brings us to a point of unity between Ismail and his lineage and Ishaq and his lineage, which is the reason why we are studying Abraham, because we're not separated as Muslims, Christians, and Jews by that separation of lineage, but we're brought into that one unit of believing in one God.
Just to amplify this one, 10 seconds, and we'll come to others. When we talk about this family as being the father and the mother of the prophets, how many, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent many prophets? Some hadith would indicate that there are hundreds of thousands. How many prophets do we know their names in the Quran? 25. From those 25, how many predate this family?
5. 2. Adam, Idris, Hud, Salih, Ibrahim. That's it. 5. We're going 5.
Less than a handful that we know their names. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Minhum man qasasna alayk, wa minhum man lam naqsus alayk." Some of those we have related to you, so it's like Prophet Adam, Prophet Noah, Prophet Hud, Prophet Salih. Less than a handful. Right? And some debate on others, but generally about a handful. All of the others are from who? This family. It's really just not a testament like the Abrahamic faith and what, like the way Allah chose this family to be, it is remarkable. That all of them, Isa, Musa, Sulaiman, all of these prophets are from what? Muhammad from this lineage. Don't lose sight of that, inshallah. We have 3 inshallah. Yes.
So we were talking about like the favorable mention among people that came after. Like that being the result of like something the people before that you advised to like the young people how to submit and they failed that test. And then the part of the kids standing after they advised you to obey and they passed. And as a result of that being the righteous really is the one after.
Yeah. A number of scholars actually, exactly as this group has pointed out, have pointed out that you can consider the gift of Ishaq and Ismail as part of the reward for who Prophet Ibrahim and these great women were as young people that came to them in dunya before Adam. A number of scholars consider that this is part of their reward because of the way he treated his father, because of the way they treated their people, that this was from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's recompense and gift to them because of their goodness in earlier years. As the Prophet says, be mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in times of difficult and in times of ease, He will protect you in times of punishment.
I was going to comment on like the psychology of the dialogue that you see. So like I think earlier on when we kind of looked at addressing his father, at least, like you notice that Ibrahim is very like gentle towards him, and I think like normally what happens is in general life, the way that the father interacts with the son, when the son grows up, he acts the same way to his child in the future. So like for example, if you had like an abusive father, then those feelings, like it's kind of the same way in the route of feelings. The feelings that he'd suppressed for so long will be unleashed kind of onto the future children. So I think it's kind of unique that Ibrahim alayhi salam kind of responded to the harshness of his father with gentleness, but instead of kind of taking the harshness that he had learned from his father and, you know, suppressing it for so long and then unleashing it onto his child that he was supposed to sacrifice, he responded in turn with kindness and gentleness.
So how starkly different he was as a father to what he experienced with his father.
For me, the sympathizer of the verse
Allah Ta'ala Prophet Ibrahim asks for something, he gets it, and Allah Ta'ala comes and says, now what do we do? That same thing at the same. I just take a lot of lessons from that. You know, thinking of a kid, they give the kid a lollipop and try taking it back. It's not gonna happen.
Very true.
Lollipop.
So, inshallah, in the last couple minutes we have, we centered on this point. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala recounts how Prophet Ibrahim saw in his dream that he was slaughtering his son. So when any of you go out here and say, I saw in a dream, I did whatever, these are the dreams of the prophets are considered part of the revelation. Therefore, what goes for an average believer, that dreams do not dictate behavior, or behavior is dictated by Sharia. Certainly Allah can gift a beautiful dream or a vision to a person, but the dreams of prophets are different. The dreams are of the revelation, have a special status. So let's just be very clear about that from some perspective. How many dreams of prophets come in the Quran and Kareem? There's one.
Ibrahim right now.
Two. We have Yusuf alayhi salam, the dream of Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam.
How many more do we have?
There's one more. There's one more. The vision of the king comes, yes. The vision of the king comes, but the visions of the prophets. There's one more. Surah Al-Fath, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam sees that they will come into a Masjid al-Haram in security, worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These three are the dreams of the prophets that come in the Quran. But this was a difficult task. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَلَمَّا بَلَغَ مَعْهُ السَّعْيُ. When he came to an age that he could, help and support, and you can see he's discussing, I'm going to get myself into big trouble here. It's not my fault, it's one of my friends from out of town. He was looking at me, he's a very honest person, and he's like, look, I don't know, my wife hates that I say this, but people talk about this feeling of like, when you have this new child and how this natural bond, and then when he had twins, a boy and a girl, and yeah, I love him and everything, but he's looking at me like, what am I supposed to do? So I just got myself in big trouble. It's not me. I haven't said this. I promise this is another person. But what he was saying was, I love them and so on, but I didn't feel this feeling like this spark. But he said, then you know what? The first time, like they smiled back at me. And then, like when they took that first step, and he told me, oh, subhanAllah, Muhammad, the first time like they were giving and talking to me, then I understood what everybody's talking about. It's a funny story, but an indication of what? Of course, the gift of a child is a gift at any time. There's a special bond, but there's something different when the child is able to give and take with you. And then when they're able to be independent, even in the smallest ways. And then you see sports matches, and the parents are there and cheering, and you're like, Wallah, your son or daughter, they're not LeBron James yet, but like, they're so there, yeah, and go. That special bond. Prophet Ibrahim was given his son, as related in the Torah, but not directly from Islam, but 86 years old. Better part of 100, or an older man, after losing hope of having a child, or expectation of having a child. When he was commanded to say he did not have another child. So this was the loss of all of his projects. And it was at an age where there was a special element to the test, that it was a loss of a child, at an age which is a different loss, although both are losses than a child, that is younger. It's a very heavy test. Allah Ta'ala never tested anyone with this test before or after this test. Allah never tested anyone with this test before or after the test of this test. And so many of the rites of Hajj and Eid al-Adha are around this, the temptation of Shaitan, the Jamarat, that when it's narrated that when he came to slaughter his son, he would put his face away from him so that the love and hanan of the father would not overtake him. It's very heavy. It's something you can't put into words. You really have to center on it and think about it, reflect on it deeply. But we're going to leave a question to reflect on. How do I bring this submission into my life? Alhamdulillah, Allah didn't test us to sacrifice our children. But He may have tested you with a challenging family circumstance. He may have tested you with authority at a young age. He may have tested you with a real frustration for something you wish was different. He may have tested you with a condition, the physical health or mental health of a loved one, that everybody else takes for granted and you can't. And nobody's there celebrating or lifting you up. He may have tested you with a difficult divorce or separation in your family. He may have tested you with a particular illness or chronic condition. He may have tested you with pain. How do we bring that submission into our lives so we enjoy the benefit of what Prophet Ibrahim had? This test, more than any test, Allah Ta'ala says, وَإِذْ ابْتَلَى إِبْرَاهِيمَ رَبُّهُ بِكَلِمَاتٍ فَأَتَمَّهُنَّ. Behold, when Allah tested Ibrahim alayhi salam with some commandments, and he fulfilled them completely. You are looking at the peak of those tests. You are looking at the test that Allah never chose another family for this type of test. But there is overlap. The Prophet ﷺ experienced a lot of death in his life. There are people amongst us that have lost loved ones. But it's a similar emotion and a different test. How did this family do it? That is what we're going to center on, inshallah, to reflect back on this and all of the other pieces. That's where we're going to start next time, inshallah. We're going to look at that and look at it very critically. How do we not just get inspired by this, but what do I do to build that sense of Islam, of submission and surrender in my life? How do I do it? And I challenge you, hold me accountable, hold us accountable to have that level of specificity before we depart. How do we bring that in? What do I do? What's the next thing that I focus on? To look at that, we're going to look at an ayah from Surah An-Nisa, from Surah Al-Hujurat. Other ayat where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about not this family in particular, but the ingredients that made up this family. And I imagine that in that reflection, it's possible that you may never have seen those ayat in this way. It's possible, and I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for His bounty, that after traversing a path of it with this family, that you come back to that ayah in a way that maybe never happened, even in your many years with the Quranic community. So we'll look at that next time, along with the remaining questions, inshallah. Make sure we go for additional questions. And then, inshallah, we're going to have a difficult moment, a moment that combines between both a sadness for the departure, but a celebration of the legacy. We will look at the death and the returning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala of all of these great figures, Prophet Ibrahim and Sarah and Hajar, and the legacy that they left behind. Some of their, their resting, the place that they are buried, the entire town now is named after them, Khalid, in Palestine. We'll look, inshallah, at their lasting legacy that we made in Hannah. So we'll do that, inshallah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is tawfiq next week, inshallah. Today, inshallah, I cannot stay for questions afterwards. I do apologize. We're going to make a prompt departure, inshallah, to prepare for some other things. I also want to remind you that with due respect, inshallah, without rushing you, we are anticipating visitors. A number of our visitors need to park close to the masjid. And so we do ask, inshallah, forgive me, I don't mean to be rude, but to, inshallah, leave the close parking spots as soon as possible for the arrival of our notice.